Now would be a good time for a history lesson.
I was imbibing alcohol legally.
All right, guys. I think that Freudian slip means that you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion, and it sounds good.
This is Clank Dialosa, and you're listening to Discography Discussion. Change the channel, and I'll break your fingers.
All the sugar dozen is 15.
What's up? This is Scott Mellinger from Zayo, and you're listening to Discography Discussion. The Fear's my favorite Zayo record.
This is Chad Kent from Atom Ship.
What's up, everybody? This is Max Cavalera, Soul Blight, and you're listening to Discography Discussion. Stay metal.
This is Andrew Schwab from Project 86.
This is Jason Wisdom of Death Therapy.
Hey, everybody, this is Jared Montague, the former drummer of Taproot.
What's up, guys? This is Joshua Toomey of the Talk to Me podcast.
This is Toby Wright, and you're listening to Discography Discussion.
This is Lauren.
This is Jenny.
And this is Matt, and you're listening to Discography Discussion.
This is Vaughn Gregory from Grave Forsaken.
Hey, this is Trey from RIP.
Hey guys, this is Scott Bowling, Good Company.
Yo, it's James from Cinemassacre on Discography Discussion. Yeah!
This one activates the pit.
What was that shit about Vietnam?
Shut the fuck up, Tony. You're out of your element.
I'm not big. I'm not, important, but at the same time, I ain't kissing anybody's ass.
What's up, guys? This is Alfonso from Heartsick.
Hey, everybody. This is Rob Rivera from Nonpoint.
Hey, this is Steven from Unteachers, and you're listening to Discography Discussion.
This is everything you like, all at once.
You have a better chance of growing a shark on your asshole.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Thanks, Geoff.
I bought the holy fucking shit edition of this.
So fucking what?
Cool. Hey, this is Brandon Kellum from American Standards, and tonight we're going to talk about the almighty Norma Jean on Discography Discussion. It's a hard word to say. Discography Discussion. There we go. Better that time.
And if Memphis shall be laid to waste from all the dancing around, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. That is Geoff. This is Brandon Kellum.
I'm out here.
And this is episode 100 of Discography Discussion, talking about the mighty Norma Jean.
100.
How did we pull this off?
We just showed up week after week 100 times. It's literally all we did.
Brandon helped.
Yeah, I think I showed up 3 or 4 of those times, so that's good, right? That's the normal band guy thing. Shows up to 3 or 4 of the practices and skips the rest.
It's a lead singer thing.
Hey, honestly, when it comes to lead singers, I probably carry more of the gear than anybody else because my talent is way down here, so I know I have to overcompensate.
Oh no, dude. Oh no, you don't do that. You just disappear.
Oh yeah, no, I tell the guys, I'm just going to grab a beer real quick and then I'll help you. And then, it turns into 2 or 3.
What you do is you hide in the van in the passenger seat and put a blanket over yourself.
Pro move right there. I feel like Dan's got this experience.
Oh yeah, dude. For real.
What we call the cubby, which is the space between the very back and the very last seat of the van.
Oh my God.
No one finds you in the cubby.
That's the perfect spot. See, I'm too fat to hide in there now. But back then I was a little bit slimmer, so it's a little easier to hide.
I saw 16-year-old or 18-year-old Dan, whatever it was, in those pictures way back. You definitely you could have fit back in the cubby back then.
Oh, for sure, and I did. But oh my God, Norma Jean. So it has been. I'm trying to think of the first time somebody asked us if we were going to do a Norma Jean episode, and I want to say it was in June of 2017. Yo, dude, where's the Norma Jean episode? I'm like, oh, it's coming. Eventually.
And, Dan's had episode 100 planned.
1 year later.
He's been having this planned since before episode 1.
Yeah, I mean, it was inevitably going to happen.
Did you know it would be a pivotal episode, you were saving it for episode 100 or saving it for, some big number?
Honestly, it was a tie between Norma Jean or Every Time I Die for episode 100, and
I would have been ready for both of those.
Yeah, I mean, the guest wouldn't have changed. Although my good buddy John Beatty would probably be pretty upset because he is the self-proclaimed ultimate Every Time I Die fan.
If he's such a big Every Time I Die fan, why did he leave the venue to go get food and then end up missing Every Time I Die at the Christmas show?
Because he had a lapse in judgment. That's all.
I felt so bad for him.
I know. I was like, tell him you're an important podcaster. They'll let you in. He's like, no,
he
dude,
messaged me and he said, can you go talk to security? I'm like, I'm absolutely nobody here. I have no pull with the security, but I'll go talk to them.
I'll see what I can do.
To them. Yeah. Not only did I talk to them, but I didn't want him to think that I was bullshitting him saying I was talking to them. So I actually took a picture of security and said, look, I'm talking to them right now. They are not having this.
Yeah. They're like anybody named John Beatty walks in here, we need at least 3 dudes to jump him.
He's on a podcast. Don't you know John Beatty?
Yeah.
The podcast has his name in it.
It should be, yeah. Well, it doesn't anymore. Officially, we have changed over to Brutally Speaking Podcast.
Oh, congrats, by the way. So I thought those were going to be 2 separate podcasts.
No.
I didn't realize that it's just merging into one, but it's on the network, right?
Correct. So we're rebranded now as Brutally Speaking, and so that just takes the place of John's Untitled Podcast, and it is now the official podcast of MetalNexus.net.
Now it's a titled podcast.
Absolutely. I'm just waiting for the checks to come in.
Pretty sweet. Put it in your 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Isn't so time to quit the day job.
Right. Exactly.
You know what they say? Always count your chickens.
Right before they hatch.
Right.
So.
Because you know how many eggs there are.
Well, before Dan spends the entire episode 100 cross-promoting his other show, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We're on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion.
How much do we love them?
We love them so much that we want more of them. We really appreciate you guys leaving us reviews, and we read them on the show every time you leave us one. But I think we need to do something special. Now that other podcast that shall remain nameless, Roach Coach, did their 100 reviews.
How many of these reviews get you to do an ICP episode?
We're not going to do an ICP episode. That's literally... Okay, 1,000 reviews, we will do an ICP episode.
Shoot, if Matt Nas gives me $20, I'll talk about the Great Malenko all night.
Will you actually wear face paint, though? Because some other people did not follow through.
Oh, I will not do that.
I would have gone through with the deal.
No.
I totally would do the face paint.
I'm not going to be there for that. I'm sick that day. Whatever day that is. 1,000 reviews. But no, if you guys give us 100 reviews, we're going to do something that also requires face paint.
Mudvayne?
We're going to do Kiss.
Kiss?
We get 100 5-star... Well, they don't have to be 5 stars, but you give us 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts, we will do a Kiss discography discussion.
All right. I think Chris is going to make like 100 different usernames.
Maybe, but he may not be happy with the result because we're doing the episode doesn't mean we're going to be particularly nice about it.
Ooh.
Do you already know what member of Kiss you're going to be?
Me?
Ooh. Are you going to be the kitty cat?
I could be, I don't know.
Peter Chris?
I kind of feel like I could be Gene, right?
I'm going to be Starman.
You'll be Starman.
I'm Pretty Boy. I could be Paul Stanley.
I'll be the Fox because I miss that guy.
Who's going to be the Ankh Warrior?
Brandon.
Well, I mean, Vinny Vincent said that he would come and do the show with us.
I'm sure he did.
We've got like a handshake agreement that he's going to show up and do that. So, we'll just call him up. Be like, Vinny, come on, do the show.
Oh, God.
It'd be perfect. But that's enough Kiss talk. Like I said, 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts, and we will do a Kiss episode. That is a promise.
Like a Patreon episode or straight up discography?
No, straight up discography discussion on Kiss.
Fuck.
Yeah. So get ready for that.
Tony might be a little upset if we don't include him.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Maybe.
And now Brandon's going to tell us all about American Standards.
What am I telling you about American Standards that you actually need to know? Oh, if you want to listen to us, pull us up on Spotify. You can tell your Alexa, listen to American Standards. Maybe. I don't know. I've never tried it. Give it a try. See what happens.
It has a hard time in my experience. It doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Here's some great deals on some toilet seats.
Every time that I talk to Alexa at all, I find myself end up just yelling at them. I have no clue why my neighbors don't think I'm murdering someone in my house. I'm like, Alexa, I said stop the radio. But yeah, you can listen to us on places: Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, and all those other places. Bandcamp. We're doing a tour here pretty soon. A tour in February. So check the social networks.
You coming close? Like, you gonna be sleeping in my basement close?
Man, I wish, every time I tell you we're going to come to the Midwest, like we swerve and do like West Coast or something, like we did the Pacific Northwest with the last one. This time we're doing, let's see here, Albuquerque, El Paso, Denver, Salt Lake City, Vegas. It's kind of like a big loop. But yeah, nowhere near you this time.
That figures.
One day.
Did you guys hear about the mayor of Albuquerque?
No.
He just had to sign a bunch of stuff in for right before Christmas, and he's wearing a Pantera ugly Christmas sweater while doing it.
Yeah.
He's like a huge metalhead.
There you go, Dan.
We got feedback on 2 of our episodes. I'm going to read these in numerical order, because if I don't say that, Dan will accuse me of reading these per my personal preference. Guitar Freak 6918 left a comment on episode 29, the Chad Kent interview. Chad is a humble dude. I've heard many drummers in my time with music, from Tool to heavier music, like August Burns Red or Architects. My favorite drummer is still one that I heard on that beautiful album, Crash of 47. And I'm going to say to that, Chad Kent is the greatest drummer in the world. And Striper is happening in 2019.
And maybe Kiss.
I'm going to say to that, Guitar Freak 6918, was that?
Yep.
Good username, screen name. That's good.
It's Brandon Kellum approved.
Sounds like an old AOL chat room name.
That's you too. Same thing.
Skaterboy69 420 Blaze It.
Looks like AC tweeted at us concerning the ministry episode with Steven Sarro. It's okay to have a little diversity over the course of your career, but these guys, or just Al, seem to have no idea where they want to go. If you like industrial metal with political undertones and a ministry cover to boot, here you go. And he linked us to, what band did he link us to? Dope. He literally linked us to Dope.
Yes.
Was it one of the guys from Dope also in Static X? Am I getting that wrong?
I don't know the answer to that.
No worries. No big deal.
I'm supposed to know everything. No, it was Dope that he linked us to. I hate Dope. I do like Dope more than I like Ministry. That's for damn sure.
I like anything more than Al Jorgensen.
Yeah.
Guy's a straight up dick.
So, Brandon.
Yep.
Tell us about the almighty Norma Jean.
So Norma Jean, the way that I found out about Norma Jean was I was actually playing in a new metal band, and I went to go print some flyers at like a Kinko's or something. You take the hand-drawn flyers, you make a copy, and you put 4 of them on a paper, and then you make a copy of that. Because this is, year 2001 maybe. And a girl comes up to us, and she says, "What are you guys doing?" And I say, "We're, making flyers for our band." She's like, "You should come to this show that I'm promoting." And she slides us a flyer that says Norma Jean on there. And I say, "What kind of music is it?" And she says, "It's hardcore music." And I'm thinking at the time, like, when I think of hardcore music, I think of like hardcore punk. I had no relation to like metalcore or what was to become metalcore. I knew of metalcore bands, but I'd never associated them as hardcore bands. It just like seemed like that term had evolved. But so she says it's hardcore, and I check them out. I think that's right before they put out Bless the Martyr. And I was immediately, right away, I said, this is exactly what I want to do. We need to drop the new metal stuff, and we need to start playing this kind of music. Those dissonant chords, or those like panic chords, I think everybody calls them. Corey calls them wank chords. That was all over the album. I just said, let's learn a couple of these and base every song off of this. And that's kind of what we did.
I'm pretty sure that's a lead singer syndrome symptom, because I believe Dan had the same conversation with me.
Oh, yeah.
Everything we do have to sound like this now. Yeah.
It didn't work.
Yep.
I'm a stubborn motherfucker when it comes to guitar.
It definitely took me a couple of months to get up to that level in the vocal department, for sure.
It's okay. I'm 10 years in now, and I'm nowhere near that, so it's good.
Well, I thought I was. Like, it's the first time I make a Cookie Monster sound with my throat that I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm just going to be drowning in chicks now.
Yeah, because every one of those guys that's growling out there is for sure drowning in chicks.
Well, Josh Skogan, whew, just look at that guy. But,
right.
Yeah, Norma Jean, I have a very similar story to how I heard about Norma Jean. It wasn't a promoter, but I'd actually had been a fan of a band called Ludacris before that. And I actually had no idea that they were Norma Jean, because Ludacris was just a solid state band. And I think at that point I'd heard Zao, obviously, Living Sacrifice, Embodiment, like Spitfire, like those older solid state bands. And as far as I knew, Ludacris was just a band that screamed a lot, but basically sounded like Deftones. They were definitely more of like a nu metal hardcore type of band, and it was totally different. So I went to Solid State's website back in my AOL days, and they're all like, Ludacris has renamed themselves Norma Jean and released an album called Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child that, and this is the exact word from the website, has produced a level of heaviness that Throwing Myself, their previous album, never even hinted at. And oh my God, dude, like the first time I heard Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child, I was just completely blown away. Like I never heard anything like it before. Because like a lot of the bands like Living Sacrifice and Embodiment and stuff, like they were certainly this heavy, but they weren't as crazy. Like they didn't have that spastic sound to them. Like the only thing that I could really compare it to at the time was like something like Training for Utopia, which is funny because when Norma Jean first started touring on this album, they played a couple of Training for Utopia cover songs. There's even a video on YouTube, which we'll link in the show notes whenever I pull it up, where they actually play a couple of Training for Utopia songs, and it just fits so well like with their set. And this was just some of the craziest shit I'd ever heard in my life. The vocals were like unrelenting. I remember whenever I got Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child, my parents bought me this album at a Christian bookstore, and I got Under Oath's The Changing of Times, and I got Living Sacrifice, Conceived in Fire.
Damn, wall-to-wall bangers.
Yeah, dude. It completely changed like how I looked at music. Like it was definitely a weird foundational purchase. My parents bought all of them. They had no idea that these records sounded like this. And I remember.
I mean, I would argue to say those three albums too are all three albums that kind of form that whole, at least the burst of like Christian metalcore bands, or I guess as people were saying, hardcore bands.
Right.
Where everybody wanted to do that for a solid 5 years after that.
Yeah, I mean, all it's missing is a copy of Fertile Words Collapse, right? That's all it really needed. But I listened to the album, and I thought it was crazy, and I didn't really know what to think about it. And I actually remembered that I'd actually seen the video for Face to Face on a Christian, I keep wanting to say it's called Skynet, but it's not. It's like Skyrock or G-Rock or something. It was a music video service, like this Christian cable network that existed back then. And I remember my band, I was in a band at the time called Jelly Donut. And we played a show at a Christian coffee shop called The Cave. And they had this cable network playing on the TVs. And it was right before we went on stage. And I saw this crazy video. I didn't know who the band was. I didn't know anything really about them. But they were like thrashing really hard. Like I remember it was just like dudes in a dark room and like jeans and black t-shirts, and like they were just headbanging the whole time. It was just the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, oh man, that's weird, And then we went on and played our show, and I think that show was whenever I was like, I'm gonna try screaming like a lot during this, and it didn't sound good, but. Joe actually has the recordings. If you contribute $1,000 to our Patreon, he'll send you the recording of that show.
I was going to say $500, and I'll post it to YouTube.
Very good. That was kind of my first exposure to that sort of stuff, but then it wasn't until I got the album that I was like, oh my God, it's the same band. And I remember because Buddy, who's sometimes on the show, he used to drive me to school every morning, and because I was in high school, and I'm like, hey, he's like, yeah, we're gonna listen to Project 86, and I was like, no, let's listen to this band Norma Jean that I got the CD from, and I put it in. He was driving a shitty like old Monte Carlo. It wasn't shitty; it was a really nice car, but I put it in his CD player, and like he gets like a minute and a half into the first song. The entire world is counting on me, and they didn't even know it. and he just like couldn't take it, so he like switched to the next song face to face. It was like that, like immediately, and then he's like, "Oh shit!" He flips it to the next song, "Memphis will be laid to waste," and it's like, "Oh!" He's like, "Dude, there's just this band doesn't fucking let up." Like, it's just pound you in the face the entire time. And
there's something about the vocals too, I think, where like they managed to like, you can tell like it sounds like he's yelling through a guitar amp, like they're heavily distorted, but you can still tell what he's saying. It wasn't like black metal distorted vocals or like the really low quality black metal vocals you're hearing in those bands. Like you can still kind of distinguish the words, which I think made it like, stick a little bit better, because you can actually tell what he's saying some of the time if you try to.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to too, because the lyrics were not really printed in the book like they were. Like you could find them, but like the liner notes for this album are totally weird. Like it's like pictures of creepy little kids and all kinds of weird shit, like old like farmhouses and stuff, but like, and it's got the track titles on, but it's all written in like black ink, so you had to like turn the book into like certain angles and like shine light on them just the right way to get the
Detective Dan here.
Yeah, dude, because I loved lyrics, and like here's the thing, I was living in a household at the time where like if my parents heard the way this album sounded, like it was going out the window.
So
like,
you had to
you
had to have a quick counter to rebuttal and be like, "No, he's talking about Jesus."
Yeah, exactly. And like it was just so totally bizarre. But over the years, like, because I listened to this album, I feel like I listened to it forever, and like it just, the lyrics came to me over time. Like just listening to it, like you were saying, Brandon, like you could hear what he was saying enough to where you could start picking up on it and piecing it together. And I probably still have like notebooks where I was like trying to write the lyrics out for the songs, because this is like before dark lyrics, like you can't just go online and pull it up, and I remember being like, oh my god, this is crazy. But then like the lyrics are so weird and abstract anyway that like if your parents were like, is this Christian music, you kind of didn't really know, like, because it is there. There are Christian undertones to the lyrics, but like this is me saying that like 10 years later, or however many years it's been. And what was this? 2002.
2002.
Shit. So it's not 10 years. It's fucking 16 years later. And I'm only just now getting a grasp on what the fuck they were talking about on this record.
Yeah, I felt like of the lyrics that you could easily distinguish, they all sound very dark and like angsty. Like if you didn't know this was a Christian band, you could have easily thought it was secular. Like, so, I mean, it sounds like you were probably already listening to quite a bit of, Solid State and Tooth and Nail stuff by this time, so you probably knew going into it. But I would definitely say that, like, a lot of people going into Norma Jean probably had no clue that they were a Christian band unless they were actually digging for it to find out.
Oh, yeah. I used to get in arguments with kids at shows all the time. Like, I was like, no, dude, they're Christian. And they're like, no. I'm pretty sure I heard Josh say fuck on stage. I was like, no, you didn't. He didn't say that. If he said fuck, then I'd have to like
Christian. He would never say that.
Yeah, watch your fucking language. But like, I mean, this record was a huge breakthrough in the secular market as well as the Christian market. Because I mean, for Christian music, it was just like nobody'd really ever heard anything like this. And in the secular world, it was kind of the same thing. Like they had such an original sound. It was like so dark and so gritty. Like everything is soaked in like 20 pounds of bacon grease. Like everything you hear is just
tasty.
Yeah, dude. Like, because I mean, as far as I know, the way this album was recorded, they just went into the studio, plugged their shit in, and recorded the album. Like it wasn't a whole bunch of like copy paste shit. No clean vocals at all. No choruses. Nothing that you could really even describe as catchy necessarily.
I don't know, dude. Aaron Weiss does a run in at the end of Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste.
I was going to say, was this the first time that you heard from Aaron? Like, is this the first time you heard like Me Without You, or did you hear Me Without You before Norma Jean?
No, I heard this first. And I didn't know, like, because I mean, when you're a kid, you don't really like make those connections of like, oh, this must be a guest vocalist. I just thought it was Josh doing it, like I didn't know.
Yeah, so this was the first time that I heard Aaron Weiss, and then I went through, and I think A to B Life came out the same year, actually, in 2002.
Yeah.
And both of those albums went on to be two albums that to this day I hold up as like some of my favorite albums, like probably within my top 20 albums, maybe even top 10 when it comes to like heavy albums.
Yeah, like this record was a big deal. I'm going to try not to spend the entire episode talking about just this record. But like it was just, I mean, fuck, dude. It was like the best thing at the time. Like I remember how big of a deal Norma Jean was. Like everybody was like, Norma Jean this, oh my God. Like Norma Jean came to town last night and they like burned the whole fucking city to the ground. You know, like it was just like you didn't know. Like I remember hearing stories about Josh, how he'd just like, you know, he'd jump up on an amplifier and then jump even higher and jump into like the rafters of the ceiling and like have the mic wrapped around his neck and just be like crawling up and down. And like it just, you didn't see that, you know, like every band that I ever seen before that, they just kind of stand there and headbang on stage, you know. But like with Norma Jean, they're just like all spinning around in circles, like jumping up and down and shit, and like thrashing everywhere, running across the stage. Nobody even knew what Josh was doing. He was like hiding behind amplifiers and shit, like jumping off into the crowd, and like he was just fucking crazy.
So I'm kind of curious, like if you did listen to Ludacris before this, how does this go? Because Ludacris was like what, like 97 through 2000, 2001. Like how does that compare to what this era or this album was?
Solid State had it right, dude. Nobody could have predicted that Ludacris was going to be Norma Jean. Like, nobody was going to predict that because Ludacris sounds like Deftones. Like, for the most part, they sound just like the Deftones, only the vocalist screams. And Josh didn't even scream the same way in Ludacris that he does in Norma Jean. Because, like, Norma Jean, like, you associate that with, like, the deep guttural vocal. But on Throwing Myself, he screams, like, kind of like a raspy... I don't want to say it's like Zayo because it doesn't really sound like Zayo, but it's that throaty, higher pitched, raspy scream. And the music, again, like there's like turntables and shit in Ludacris. There's clean vocals. Like Throwing Myself is a cool album. There's like 2 really good songs on it, and there's one song on that album called Light Blue Collar. Most people, if they've heard anything by Ludacris, they've heard Light Blue Collar. And that is probably the closest hint of what you're going to get with Norma Jean, just like a year later.
And what takes Ludacris to Norma Jean, where Norma Jean now like has this big buzz? Is it like a change in label, in your opinion? Is it like they just completely changed their sound? It sounds like what you're saying. Like their live shows now just insane. Like what makes them go from Ludacris to Norma Jean? And I guess like also like, do they just go to it because maybe actually the rapper Ludacris, or is it, you know, some other reason? I personally haven't even looked into it.
They changed their name because of the rapper. This is when Ludacris the rapper was really starting to get big.
Fair.
And now they didn't spell it the same way. They were Luti, Luti, Chris, Kriss.
I mean, both being from
so
Georgia, I can
funny.
see how that'd be confusing.
Yeah, so they changed it into Norma Jean, which I believe Norma Jean means, like in Latin or something, like patterns of God's grace. So they went with that because they were still like really good Christian boys back then. And they were. Like I remember them talking about Jesus on stage and stuff, and they did all that stuff that Christian bands do that kind of annoys people. But but again, Norma Jean was so cool that people didn't care.
And Bless the Martyr and Kiss the Child. It's the latest album by Ludacris. The band just has a different name. If you look at it that way, this is the result of everything they did before.
Well, it kind of is, but like it isn't, because like I hear a lot of Coalesce on this record, and I didn't hear any of that on Throwing Myself. So it's like they just changed influences. They went in a much more like Coalesce, Converge type of direction that you'd never even really heard on Throwing Myself. The only thing that's really extreme about Throwing Myself is the vocals. And again, they don't even sound like they do on Bless the Martyr.
And to say like 4 or 5 years of the band Ludacris is like, that's pretty significant in band years, right? Most bands are a couple of years, so, and especially back then. So to say they did that for 4 or 5 years, and then this was really what made them break as a new sound, a new name, and everything. It's kind of interesting. And then they went on to change members a million times since then too.
Yeah, well, I think that like, I mean, even in the secular world, I mean, obviously in the Christian world, there was nothing like this. But then in the secular world, you had like what? Coalesce, Converge, and you had like Dillinger Escape Plan.
Probably Botch. I mean, I don't know if Botch was secular, I'm assuming.
We'll talk about Botch on the next episode, on the next album. But yeah, like Botch was completely like a huge influence on this record and the next record. But there's a couple things we need to talk about because we got to wrap up our talk on Bless the Martyr. We're going to talk about it the whole episode. Basically, during the Bless the Martyr album cycle, or the tour cycle or whatever for this album, Josh Scogin, the fucking powerhouse lead singer, this dude that we all loved, because I mean there's no denying his vocal delivery is almost inhuman on this album. I mean, it is just incredible. He leaves the band just one day before a show, goes, "Hey guys, I need to talk to you for a minute." Was talking to Jesus. Jesus was like, "Hey Josh, you need to leave Norma Jean." And then he gets up on stage that same show and is like, "Hey guys," was talking to Jesus, and he said, "I gotta leave the band." So that was his last show with the band, and he just drove the fuck home in the middle of a tour.
What do you think the real reason is behind that? Because going off of what they did after this, although the style did change a little bit, it doesn't seem like it changed enough for it to be like we had complete creative differences, in my opinion. Like, what do you think, like, the underlying, or do you think it truly was just, I was talking to Jesus, I gotta get out?
Honestly, I don't know.
Because, I mean, at this point, they've worked for 4 or 5 years. They're starting to get some buzz. They're on a label that makes sense for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me, it seems like career suicide, but like we know that obviously it was not that for him. I don't know if it was like a cool factor, like if he had some kind of like long-term game plan where he was like, I just put out the best fucking record of my career. If I quit now, people are going to follow me to my next project. You know, because like maybe they could have put out like 3 more Bless the Martyrs, but what are the odds of that?
Do we know, did Josh was like, who actually formed Norma Jean? Do we know that? Is it Josh, or is it like one of the other guys? Or
Josh was a big part of it. I mean, he was the singer of Ludacris from the beginning. Like, they were all part of a youth group and all that. I don't know all of the history on that. I don't know if I'll ever hear it unless we have Josh himself on the podcast and we can ask him, but which I'm totally down to do. But the thing is that, like, I think if you take the religion aspect out of it, it has to be the 5-year plan. The where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I think he thought, well, if everybody loves Bless the Martyr and they love me, they're going to listen to whatever it is that I listen to. Or they're going to listen to whatever it is that I come up with next.
And many of them did.
Yeah, dude,
but they didn't stop listening to Norma Jean.
Yeah, I did. Oh, I mean, people were pissed. I remember because they were like, when Josh quit and started the Chariot, you know, we were like, you know, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like, people were pissed off. They're like, Norma Jean's not going to be as good or whatever. But I remember thinking, like, I'm totally okay with, like, if they get another good singer, that, like, now I've got 2 cool bands to listen to, you know, instead of just one. And, yeah, like, it might have been Jesus. Maybe Jesus was giving him the 5-year plan. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that at all. But, like,
it makes me think of At the Drive-In.
Yeah, very similar.
That's kind of the vibe I got. And it was the fact that everybody was still popular afterwards, which is highly unusual that whenever you have one band that's starting to get a lot of buzz and it's essentially splits off and you get 2 separate bands and they're both successful. That doesn't happen very often.
No.
Normally one entity is way more popular than the other, if any of them are popular at all. But yeah, you guys are loving on Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child. Every time I think I'm going to say something, Dan just keeps going on and on and on about
dude, I fucking love this record, man.
His pure love. It's just like, when that's the reason why I'm not saying anything, because it's not like he's not being a jerk about it. He just genuinely loves this album. Like, he has so much passion for it that I don't have.
Guys, it's been 40 minutes. We got to talk about the other albums.
I feel like I'm there with you too, Dan, but I also feel like going into Oh God, the Aftermath, it had to be a hard year or two for Norma Jean to really figure out what they're doing after that. And I had no clue that during that time they had a guy that wasn't Corey singing for him.
Yeah, they
which I was kind of curious if you knew anything about that. Brad
His
Norris
name was Brad Norris. Yeah, I remember that, and I actually saw him, and I don't have anything to say other than he did fine. You know what I mean? Like he sounded all right live. He sang the songs. I remember they actually played a few songs instrumental. They played a few shows instrumentally, and they would let people come up from the audience and sing the songs.
That's cool.
Dude,
There's
it's
actually
so cool.
a video on YouTube of a local show in St. Louis where they did that, and the only vocalist the entire show was Aaron Weiss coming up to do his part for Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste.
Was Dan Terry. No. If I'd have gone to that show, who knows? Maybe I'd be the lead singer of Norma Jean right now.
2005. Oh, God. The Aftermath.
So there was a lot of hype about who the new singer was. Who is this guy? All we knew, or at least I knew, is this dude named Corey Brandon. However, I knew who he was because I was a big fan of Living Sacrifice. And I knew that this dude named Corey Putman, who was the brother of a guy named Matthew Putman played percussion for Living Sacrifice. When they were doing their hammering process and Consumed in Fire, they had an additional percussionist on stage for those albums. And Corey actually played guitar for Living Sacrifice for a few tours or a few shows. I don't know what the exact is. If we can ever get Corey on the show, we'll ask him. But the thing is that he was actually supposed to replace Bruce as the singer of Living Sacrifice.
Really?
At one point.
I need everybody to take 5 seconds to think about what that would have sounded like.
It would have been interesting. But Corey's actually said in interviews that whenever he went to sing for Living Sacrifice, he couldn't do it. It was like another Jesus thing. He wasn't supposed to sing for that band. And so he joined Norma Jean as their lead singer. And I remember all the hype. Everybody was like, oh my God, who is this guy? Corey Brandon, who is he? What does he sound like or whatever? And we didn't know for the longest time. We knew that Norma Jean was in the studio recording a new album. We knew that it was going to be called Oh God, the Aftermath. And they finally released a song on a Solid State Records compilation, and the song was called In Reference to a Sinking Ship. And it's not even the album version. It's a different recording. And I remember hearing Corey's vocals on that for the first time and thinking as soon as he opened it up with oh my God, he went into it, really went for the throat. I remember thinking this might be okay. Everything might be all right. And then he starts singing too. He does this cleaner type of chorus or whatever. But it wasn't a clean chorus. It just sounded like a dude yelling into the microphone, but not doing his demon scream, And I was like, well, I mean, it's kind of a clean vocal, but it's also kind of not, it's this weird middle ground. And I remember reading an interview with one of the members of the band that goes, yeah, there's a lot of that on the album, but it's not cleaned up pop singing or anything. It's just, it's manly,
how you yell at your kids?
How you yell at your kids? Yeah, it's not exactly melodic, but it's cool.
It gave me a bit of it definitely wasn't radio rock. It wasn't butt rock, but it gave me at that time, and maybe this is only in contrast or comparison to the prior album, but when he sang, it gave me a bit of a nu metal vibe, which I was kind of on the opposite path. I came from nu metal and I was going towards more extreme stuff. So when he started singing, it gave me those vibes of, especially in this album and then going into Redeemer, it felt a little more like nu metal singing in a hardcore band or a metalcore band.
Yeah, I could see that a little bit. I didn't take it that way because, dude, I was so on the Norma Jean dick at that point that I was okay with whatever they were going to give me. And this record does
I don't
sound...
say that in a bad or derogatory way. Don't get me wrong.
No, it just is what it is. Yeah. And it was a hell of a debut because this is the hardest screaming we've ever heard from Corey Brandon. If you want to be when did his voice sound the most extreme? It definitely did on Oh God, the Aftermath.
Essentially when he's doing his version of Bless the Martyr.
Well, I had gotten to that point because I was trying to be a good hardcore singer. So like I would warm up to like Bless the Martyr. I could sing the whole album at one point, and like in my basement, like it was probably really pathetic now that I say it out loud, but like it.
In your
could
basement,
sing,
your parents' basement.
my parents' basement.
Oh, that's even better.
I could sing
Dad,
Bless the
shut
Martyr.
the hell up.
Dude, seriously, I could go for like a whole hour and just
Son, are you okay down there?
do the whole album. And I remember trying to scream like Corey on "Oh God, the Aftermath," and like it almost made me want to puke.
Make sure you wipe your butt when you're
Like-
finished.
Mom, I'm practicing my art.
Well, like his vocals were so guttural at times that like I really wanted to puke. Like he extends notes for like, well, they're not really notes, it's all screaming, but like when he screams like for like really long periods of time, like it really just like upset my stomach a little bit. Like it was hard to do. And then like I tried to do his singing vocals, which I quickly gave up on. Like I couldn't do those. And I remember this record just being really extreme, but it was definitely one of those, like, it's still a super heavy record. It's super aggressive. It sounds a lot like Botch, but I'm okay with it. I remember thinking, like, okay, it's fine. Norma Jean's still a cool band, and Josh has this Chariot thing going on the side, so, like, if I want to hear that, I can go and listen to that, which we'll get into the Chariot in another episode, but, like, episode 200. But, no, like... It definitely, I was like, okay, this guy's really cool. I like him. I'm on board, and I'm interested in what the band's going to do from here on out.
I mean, this is also, like I said, I think this is where Corey comes in. He probably feels the weight of filling the shoes of Josh before him, so he has to come in heavy, and they're in a transitionary phase where now I'm assuming there's an inkling of like we can actually throw some choruses and throw some structure to this. So I mean, I do think he came in heavier than the band ultimately went. Not to say they're not heavy now, but like I said, I think this was a transition into showing us something that we haven't seen for Norma Jean. Also, very interesting song names, where the song names are kind of all puns or split up words.
And that's one thing that's interesting to me about Norma Jean. As a whole, throughout the albums, you're not sure as a listener who's in charge. The first record, Bless the Martyr, it has those elaborate song names. If you look at the Chariot, that clearly was a Josh thing, or at least it appears to be that. It makes sense that on Oh God, the Aftermath, they would do that just to keep the same feeling for the fans. This is something they expect, so we have to have these long names. So that was Corey kind of doing his Josh thing, but then you have these semi-melodic choruses thrown in at the very end, and as we go on, the sound changes more and more, for better or for worse, depending on how you look at it. For me, it's a progression in the art that would be there even if the original lead singer never left and none of the members were replaced. It would have been exactly the same from the listener perspective.
I do have one thing to add that I find kind of interesting, since we keep referencing Botch all the time. The dude that did the producing, engineering, and mixing on this album actually has worked with Botch.
That explains everything.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, well, that kind of... We were kind of putting two and two together without even realizing it.
This is one of my favorite things, but can I disagree with Joe for a minute? I don't think that this does sound like it would have sounded if Josh had been in the band. I think sonically, as a listener, I think we probably would have got that first Chariot album in some form from Norma Jean. Because, Oh God, the Aftermath, the only negative I can really say about it, it is the cleanest sounding Norma Jean album. It is, like, compared to Bless the Martyr, which was, like, soaked in distortion and feedback, Oh God, the Aftermath is still crazy. It's still spastic, but it sounds super clean. Super, super squeaky clean.
You know, this may only be, like, looking at it in hindsight, but I don't mean this in a bad way to the other members of Norma Jean, but I almost feel like the rest of the guys playing the instruments in Norma Jean need a captain to steer the ship. So to your point, Dan, like, Josh was going to go off and create the Chariot, like that sound, regardless if he did that with the guys in Norma Jean or he did that with, the guys that became the Chariot. And then with Corey now, and looking from this album till today, it really seems like Corey steered the band in a different direction, and now has become very much like, the person that seems to be making the decisions in the band. Like, he seems to be the face and the voice of the band, not only as a singer, but the person that's kind of leading the direction of the band.
That becomes blatantly obvious in 2 albums.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% that they was definitely a captain type of situation. There's not a lot of bands, I think, where the lead singer contributes everything, like especially not in metalcore. But like Corey was, or is, a really skilled guitarist, and he wrote a good majority of the songs on Oh God, the Aftermath. So he definitely did steer the band in a different direction. Now, I agree with what Joe was saying about, like, for the listener, I think the only reason this album is as crazy as it is there was a certain expectation built up of this is what the fans want to hear. They want to hear Norma Jean. They want a fast, in-your-face, spastic type of record with long song titles. It has to be that. But it still sounded different enough to establish Corey as, hey, there's a new captain on board. And he owns it really well.
And I also think, like, this album was a pretty pivotal or beloved album. Like, I feel like for a lot of Norma Jean fans, like, you're either a Bless the Martyr fan, or you're like, Oh God, the Aftermath. Those seem like the 2 albums that people really, kind of cling on to as their own. For me, listening to Bless the Martyr first, Bless the Martyr was always kind of mine. And I started to fall off a little bit, and then I come back on a few albums later. But it's interesting with the guys in American Standards being a couple years younger than me. They're very much in the mind that, like, Oh God, the Aftermath is a pinnacle of Norma Jean. And we did the 10-year anniversary. They did that little 10-year anniversary tour of Oh God, the Aftermath. And that was like the biggest thing in the world for all the guys in American Standards, because this is the album they hold to as like I said, like the pinnacle. Like, when you look at this type of music, this is what it needs to be.
Well, yeah, and it's almost an impossible achievement in that we changed lead singers. We had the most hype surrounding our band ever. We released another album, and we didn't fuck it up. Like, it's still beloved. And as far as Norma Jean goes, if you're only concentrating on the Corey aspect of it, this is technically the first Norma Jean album as we know them today.
Back on what Brandon was saying, I'm kind of a third party on that. I'm the weird, Green Party independent, because I didn't really get into them until later on. I had somebody walk into the video game store that Dan and I used to work at, and they had a band jacket that was just tagged up and down Norma Jean stuff, and I'm like, Nora Jones? I'm like, no, that's I'm like, what the fuck? They have like a jazz, musician tagged all over their jacket, and I'm like, okay, I'll check it out. So I didn't actually really get into them until or pay attention to them until Redeemer, and that actually wasn't even my favorite album.
Let's talk about Redeemer then. 2006.
Oh man. So the first time I heard Redeemer was on a MySpace album stream. It was like 2 weeks before the album came out, and they're like, fuck you guys. Here's the album. Listen to it. Bow at its greatness. It starts off as a distortion feedback-soaked affair, which culminates in one of their very first choruses where Corey screams, "Let's break out the shotguns. We're going to town." And they do. Now, this record sounds more like Bless the Martyr in a strange kind of way. This is almost more pandering to the fans than Oh God, the Aftermath was. Because Oh God, the Aftermath was kind of its own thing. Like, it was still Norma Jean, but it didn't have all those weird, like, feedback-soaked places, like, parts in it. Whereas this album has tons of that. This album is back to sounding super gritty. Like, there's just a layer of fucking pork fat all over it.
Do you think that's reactionary to the feedback for the prior album, or do you think that's a choice by the band? Like, what? Or, I mean, this is a Ross Robinson album, so do you think that maybe he was just kind of had a heavy hand in it?
I could see him trying to pull the Norma Jean out of Norma Jean, because I think by Redeemer we were still basically the same band with a new singer, and I could be wrong about that, but they went a little bit back to that sound, because like I had a buddy of mine named Mike that didn't like Oh God the Aftermath but really liked Redeemer, because he said that Corey sounds more like Josh on this album, and I couldn't disagree more, because like this album has a lot of the breadcrumbs that were going to lead us into what Norma Jean was going to become. So this album sounds like a pop version of Bless the Martyr, because it's got choruses, it's got clean sung choruses, it's got all the screaming, all the feedback that you would expect from a Norma Jean album, it's got the breakdowns, it's got all of that stuff. But overall, it's much more melodic than anything we've heard from Norma Jean up to this point.
From a production standpoint, this is the most chaotic album. Everybody is doing something different throughout its entirety. There are points where I want to ask the members, are you guys playing the same song?
Do you feel there's any standout songs, or what for you guys? What are your standout songs from this album?
I really like A Small Spark versus A Great Forest. That's was
mine too.
Yeah, that was really good. And it had kind of more of like Corey's more emotional singing on it. And The End of All Things Will Be Televised is great, because it's like a total throwback to Bless the Martyr. Like that song and The Longest Lasting Statement basically sound like songs off of Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child with Corey singing on them. And they sound great. Like, I love them.
Small Spark, The End of All Things Will Be Televised, A Grand Scene of Color and Film, Blueprint for Future Homes.
Yeah, Blueprint for Future Homes was like the single they released off of this. And you can totally see why. I mean, it's got a really great chorus. It's very catchy. So can we talk about Corey singing a little bit here? Because like on Oh God the Aftermath, he sang, but it wasn't quite like this. It wasn't like in the chorus type of singing. Whereas in this album, he goes full chorus. I will say, and maybe my detriment if Corey's listening to this, I don't think that Corey's voice works for every band. Like, he doesn't have a smooth pop croon or anything that you'd be like, oh, wow, those clean vocals are, like, outrageously exceptional. But you put it in Norma Jean, and it works for some reason. Like, it works 100%. Like, he's not the greatest singer in the world, but for Norma Jean, he's the greatest singer in the world.
Do you think he's convinced you as the listener that he is the lead singer and this is how it's supposed to sound?
Yeah, because like I don't bat an eye at it.
I can't imagine Norma Jean without it. The moments when he's singing and I want to say, what did you just sing? Little mashed potato mouth going on there, Corey? I quit caring about it years ago. If it wasn't there, I wouldn't feel the same way about these songs.
Yeah, that's fair. And you know, like, one thing that I haven't asked him, or I don't know if I would ask him, is I wonder if like he truly, if it was a battle to say that he wanted more singing or more choruses. Because I look at, like, as we're looking into the future when he starts doing 100 Suns, and it is more choruses and more structured. If he was trying to always push that with Norma Jean, and it was kind of like a give and take, and this is kind of the pinnacle of what the balance is, you know, the balance of heavy, but still having structure and still having some choruses.
Yeah, I think he pushed for that. But again, I don't think he pushed for it in like the we want to sell this many records kind of way. I think it was just like, we can't always just play like Bless the Martyr type shit.
Yeah.
We did that already.
Yeah, there has to be a point where we have to write songs that people are going to remember, songs that are going to really stick with people, and songs that you could have an emotional attachment to. And it's hard to have an emotional attachment whenever you're just feedbacking over breakdowns. You know, it is hard because the emotional attachment is testosterone, you know, on that stuff. So you get a little bit more melody, you get a little bit more chorus on Redeemer. And if you're smart, you're hearing it and being like, okay, it's possible that this band could go full melodic before they go back to being heavy. And that's exactly what they did.
Ladies and gentlemen, The Great Divider, 2008, The Anti-Mother. I have zero problems with this album. I think the only reason I can say that is I am not holding on to Bless the Martyr as the greatest Norma Jean album. This album as a whole is great. Knowing that they spent time in the studio in one of the most guerrilla situations I've ever seen on film, literally shoved into a corner room in the basement that had just been converted into a studio within that week, just hammering these songs. Creatively, I'm intrigued by that, because at a glance, it looks like they wrote it in the studio a la Metallica, which is a little frustrating. If you've ever seen the making of, you've got a guy who I assume is the producer with earplugs in the room with them, basically barking orders at the drummer. Do this, do that, do this, do that. And it turned into this. Also, Chino's in the room.
Yeah, I was going to say, with this one, they started doing some co-writing with Chino, which is interesting because, like you said, it went more melodic. So almost where they started, where you're drawing those connections to Deftones with Ludacris, they end up back in that a lot more than they had ever been.
I have to say I like it. This is the version of Norma Jean that I personally like the best, and I know that I'm on my side of the line. So I don't know if anybody else is on the other side of the line, but I dig it. I like it a lot.
I think Corey Brandon pulled the wool over anybody who was hanging on to the old Norma Jean and said, "This is Norma Jean now. Enjoy."
I think there's two ways you can look at this album, and I've looked at it both ways. The first way is, what the fuck happened to this band? Like, I don't listen to Norma Jean for the singing. I don't listen to Norma Jean for the, more melodic songs or slower paced songs. I listen to Norma Jean because I want to fucking dance at shows, and I want to punch people to strobe lights, and I want to hear them play fucking Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste. And like, they could play that 12 times and I'd be totally satisfied.
You still get that at every show.
Yeah.
Usually with Josh Kogan showing up at the end.
Right. The other way to look at it, though, is that, like, Norma Jean couldn't sustain themselves off of that sound forever. And Oh God, the Aftermath, they didn't. They took a break from the Bless the Martyr sound. Redeemer, they kind of returned to it. On the Anti-Mother, this is, I believe, Corey Brandon, the album. Because he was going for a much more melodic sound. He went for songs. You can hear a lot of, like, that old school emo aspect to a lot of these songs. There's a lot of 90s alternative rock going on this album. And it's mostly sung. You've got, like, a couple of heavy ones. You've got Birth of the Anti-Mother. And maybe that's it. There's the Birth of the Anti-Mother, which, of course, they released first because they didn't want everybody to just fucking not buy the album. But the other song they released was a song called Robots 3 Humans 0, which is actually my favorite song on the album. Even though it's basically a rock song. It's not a Norma Jean song. It's totally unrecognizable as Norma Jean. And I've actually heard Corey say in interviews that this album was necessary for them to put out because it draws a fucking line in the sand.
And it's funny because, like, with this one, like, as you guys talk about it, I do think this is the one that could have, or this is the one that I think when Corey puts it out is what became 100 Suns almost. This is, like, to me, probably the seed of this is what I want 100 Suns to, or what I want Norma Jean to be. And if it can't be Norma Jean, then I'm going to make it something else, this sound. So by this time, honestly, I had fallen off with Norma Jean. Not for sake of what Norma Jean was doing, but we've had a few albums by this point. I got what I wanted from them, and I was kind of heading in a different direction. So I honestly didn't listen. I probably, when it first came out, I might have listened to it a few times. Wasn't super into it. I think the first song, like Viper, Snakes, and More, kind of like caught my attention, but it was really that first song, everything in between, which I was so on, and then the last song, which I forget the name of the last song, but I know it's a longer one. Those two were the only two that really caught my attention on this album.
Yeah, that's actually probably my favorite on this album.
Oh my God, when that little kid choir kicks in.
Yeah, and there's like cellos and stuff mixed in as well.
Yeah, dude.
I was digging it.
But going back, I appreciate this album so much more now. You know, when you put 10 years on top of it, and I also think that maybe something to what you guys are saying is, I think this is almost like the bubble of metalcore. Like 2008 is like they had to do something different because the writings were on the wall. Metalcore was not going to last forever. And they had to figure out what was next. And maybe this is what they thought was next, or maybe this is just what they thought, well, we've built a fan base, so let's do what we want to do.
Well, I think they were dropping breadcrumbs all through Redeemer. Like, you're kind of stupid if you couldn't predict this album off of listening to Redeemer. But, like, eventually they were going to go in this direction. And, like, I'm not going to lie, I used to be a meathead. And when I first heard this album, my first reaction was, fuck this album, fuck this band. What's the Chariot doing right now? Like, I literally, that was me, you know? But then me and Joe sat down and listened to it. We were on our way to a friend's wedding, and we listened to the whole album on the way there. And, like, after that, dude, for, like, 2 or 3 months, Joe and I listened to this album religiously. Like, it was like a cult following. Like, we were, like, pointing out all the intricacies of the album and just like how it flows and how it's all put together. And we just came to the conclusion that it's an amazing rock record put out by Norma Jean, because like I was talking about, it's not clean sounding. It still sounds, like I said, like that 10,000 pounds of bacon grease on top of it. It doesn't sound like a pop rock album, but it's a rock album put out by Norma Jean. And that was just something that you had to accept. This is the new norm. This is the band moving forward. If you're going to jump off board, now's the time to jump off board. But if you stick with them and see what they actually have to offer, you're going to find a little bit deeper of an experience than you would get with just Bless the Martyr Part 2.
Yeah, I just viewed it as like Taking Back Sunday with balls. So I was totally on board.
So how, like, if you had to ballpark the percentage of people that this alienated or that jumped off board at this point, what do you think that would look like?
Honestly, I think anybody that jumped off during Oh God, the Aftermath, because Josh isn't in the band.
Could be.
I'm not convinced anybody really gave up on Norma Jean because of the Anti-Mother.
I would disagree.
Do you think
I
they're
think it's
gaining
a 50-50.
new people because of this sound, though?
Definitely not.
No, because I think at this point, the name Norma Jean is still synonymous with feedback-soaked breakdowns. I think anybody that goes in, it's kind of like when we did our Megadeth episode, and I like bought this album by the band, and it was called Risk, and it sounded totally different than what I was expecting the band to sound like. I feel like everybody that was checking out Norma Jean was checking them out on the recommendation of Bless the Martyr, or maybe even an Oh God, the Aftermath. And I think Redeemer was similar enough to Bless the Martyr that it kept people on board, but it's all the other shit that's focused on in the Anti-Mother. So I think it's a 50-50. I think they probably lost fans on this, but I think that they probably also gained fans, or at the very worst, they retained the only fans that they cared about.
Do you think that's what ultimately led them to a year later leaving Solid State?
Possibly. I mean, Corey had said in an interview that the reason they left Solid State was because he was tired of people telling him no all the time on like what they could do, because you got to look at this from Solid State's perspective. They want another Bless the Martyr, and they think maybe they're going to get it. They kind of got it with Redeemer, and I think they were like, well, yeah, but the album sales are going to tank if you go in this hard rock direction. And honestly, I think Corey was like, well, if you're not on board with what we're doing, then fuck you. You know, like, I think that was the whole thing, because I think he very much was captain of the ship at this point. And he was like, I want to express myself as an artist, and if you guys aren't going to let me do that, then I don't want to be part of it. And I think that was the whole reason why they switched to Razor and Tie after that.
2010. Meridional.
Meridional. Yeah. If we do get Corey on the podcast at some point, I'd love to hear how he pronounces the name of the album.
This is the one I most regret not being fully, into the, like, not into the band, but not like listening to the band as much as I used to, because at this point, I didn't even listen to Meridional when it came out. But I think it wasn't until, honestly, a few years ago that I went back to the album. I said, wow, this is as good as Norma Jean gets, in my opinion. And at that time, I didn't even listen to it. I mean, it took me 5, 6, 7 years to even get into it.
I know it's a good idea to open a record with a really good ear-catching song to get the listener interested, but Norma Jean has a way of doing something at the start of the album that reminds you of what you liked on the last record, almost as a fisherman with a hook and a really nice juicy worm. Just, come on, you know you like this. Yeah, it won't be like last time. There won't be a hook involved. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, this record starts off strong. It doesn't sound like Bless the Martyr, though. And I think that's important to focus on because it's a fucking heavy version of Norma Jean on the Anti-Mother. You know, it's not Bless the Martyr heavy. It's not feedback-soaked fucking breakdowns. It's the Anti-Mother version of Norma Jean playing a much heavier style with more screaming, but there is a differentiation there. So when Corey has said in interviews that, like, the Anti-Mother was a necessary record that they had to put out in order to show people that this is where we're at now, I think this album brings back the chaos, but it brings back their own version of chaos that they've carefully curated and released for us. And again, I think there was a little bit of deception in the marketing for this album because the first song that they released like a 10-second teaser of the Anthem of the Angry Brides. And that song is like a very chaotic song. I don't think it sounds like Bless the Martyr.
That's my favorite song on the album, too.
Yeah, dude. Like, it's
no
like,
surprise.
But it's like, it's different than Bless the Martyr because it's not just like heavy chords, you know, and feedback. It's like heavy riffs, but like with like this weird, intricate lead guitar work. But it still sounds super chaotic and super weird. And Corey screams his lungs out on that song at the end where he's just like, "You're not getting under my skin." You know, like it's a fucking perfect song. But I understand that like this song was basically released and teased to get the old Norma Jean fans back on board. Like if you jumped off the ship for Anti-Mother, you might jump back on board for this album because of that song.
And that's kind of a hard task too, because by this point the band's been around for, you know, well over a decade, and they've gone through, you know, several different band members, different sounds. They've experimented with different stuff, different labels, and then now with that song, like you said, if they're trying to get people back. They're trying to get people back that, you know, if they listen to them at 18, they're 28 now, you know, or if they listen to them at 15, they're 25. They're in a very different point of their life. So it's, do they need to get people back, or do they need to figure out what will get the young crowd back into them, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if this was aiming at the young crowd, though, really. Like, I don't know who this album's for. I feel like it's for me because I love it.
I think it's for themselves. I don't think it's for
them. That's wise, Geoff, because I think that explains every Norma Jean album from now on.
Yeah, I think they make music for themselves and they leave it up to the listener to interpret it how they feel.
Yeah, this is the Corey train. You want to get on?
Yeah, I've been on.
He said on Redeemer, "I'm going to ride this train to the end. The last stop is the cemetery." You know, and I believe that 100%. Because I think Corey is still like, I'm the lead singer of Norma Jean, so like I like to throw down and do these heavy songs, but I also like to have a little bit more meaning to my music. So like the first big single off of this album was Deathbed Atheist, which, you know, for any of the Christians that were listening to the band who weren't sure if the band was still quote unquote Christian or not, like I feel like a song like Deathbed Atheist, like, no, guys, we're still the same Norma Jean that you guys love. You know, we're being a little bit more clever about it. we're not being as angsty or whatever. Because like I feel like Corey's lyrics from here on out are like equally praising of God, but also like questioning of God. And I think that's more important for somebody that's going through like a spiritual journey to weigh the pros and cons, weigh the situation, you know.
So you disagree with like blind faith? You have to be able to ask those questions,
right? And I don't think that Norma Jean is a blind faith band. I think Corey believes what he believes, but is giving us a dose of like reality.
Yeah, I think because you're right, because the blind faith thing, you know, you're lacking perspective.
Correct.
And I think that's part of the reason why I do enjoy these albums. I was texting Dan earlier. I never quote stuff, and we were going back and forth on multiple times quoting, you know, different songs. I think the lyrics are very, very clever, and they actually do invoke a process of thought. Whereas I think earlier on, it was just all about, like Dan said, about being a meathead, and it's just, you know, kick some ass.
Having one cool line that everybody would scream at the show.
Yes.
Yeah. Like taking a knife to a gunfight. You know, like, yeah, and like that was cool. It's still cool.
It's
I still
no dancing around.
Yeah, like it's still cool. But like this is much more clever, you know.
Yeah, this is more my speed. I as well. You know, being one of the elder statesmen that's a lot of times it's on the podcast. This is more, I guess, refined. I think they've actually, it's been almost like fine wine. They've gotten better as time has gone on, at least from lyrically. I've really enjoyed it as time has gone on. And I was not expecting that, because I normally don't sit down and listen to lyrics. And it really actually made me want to think after listening to songs, which is highly unusual for me.
Well, and really, Geoff, I mean, if we can be just transparent as we can be, when I told you like Norma Jean 100 episode 100, this is going to be our fucking peak, you know, this is going to be our pinnacle episode. I think you were like, I mean, I think the band's cool, but I don't understand you guys' obsession with them, you know. And then he heard the Anti-Mother, and he heard this album, and
yeah, and I think
am I on the right track here?
Yeah, because it really it wasn't until the Anti-Mother that I really got on board.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I disliked what was beforehand, but I was really believing what they were preaching afterwards, so to speak. It really it hit home. It started to hit more of my my emo roots, like the original emo stuff. I was really starting to feel like I was at home. I started to make those connections that I used to make with music I used to listen to all the time in my teens and 20s.
So you believed what they were preaching when they stopped preaching?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's mainly because they stopped preaching and they started asking me to think for myself with their lyrics.
And that is what the message of this album is, and a little bit of Wrongdoers also. I think this album is for the Norma Jean fan that's been listening for almost 10 years. You're not a teenager anymore. You're not in high school anymore worrying about little problems. Real life is here. It's time to figure it out. And I don't know that that's specifically the message that's going on here, but when I think of Deathbed Atheist, I think you're going to have to make your own decisions, not just about what you do on a day-to-day basis, but how you really think about the world.
I think it's a pretty interesting point too. Like that, when you look at these albums, it's who is this actually for? Is this with like, you know, Meridian and Wrongdoers? Are they, if they're just speaking to you know, the younger crowd and everything, are they actually breaking through to younger people, or are they actually writing them for people, like you said, like 10 years that have been with the band and now they're growing with the band? Like what? Yeah, like bringing a knife to a gunfight is something cool that, like, when you're 18 you're going to yell, but it doesn't necessarily have substance. You just feel like you're part of it because that's what's buzzing at the time. But now, as you talk about it, you know, 10 years down the line, they put out these albums. These albums might be something that have a little more substance, that you're actually thinking about, that you could actually, you know, that have longevity, not because of one cool line, but because it actually has more depth to it.
Because we're all getting older. Not just you, the listener, but me, the musician.
Can I say this? Is it okay to say this? Like, I'm an adult now.
How many times can you say this?
I'm an adult. I'm an adult now. And so the adult in me appreciates that Norma Jean has grown with me, instead of it being just this cool thing I remember from when I was a teenager. Because, like, on the Ministry album, we talked about how, like, Al Jorgensen is, like, super old, not a touch, and, like, still thinks he's cool because he's doing the same shit he was doing back in the 80s. That's not the case with Norma Jean. Like, as Corey Brandon has gotten older, I've gotten older as well, and I've gained more perspective on life and a lot of these topics that are talked about on these albums. And I totally get it now on a level that I wouldn't have understood when I was like 16. And that's why these albums like continue to be great. Like, because I'm definitely, I say this so much on the show, but like Norma Jean is better to me now than they were back then.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of add on to that a little bit, especially what we were asking about earlier on, are they trying to get to younger listeners? And I don't think so. I think what they're trying to do is branch out from their current listeners, almost like a word of mouth type of thing. You know, they want whoever was, you know, when they were listening to it at 15 is now 25. They want their other friends who are 25 to listen to this instead of trying to get new 15-year-old listeners, because that's trying to reinvent yourself and reinvent the wheel over and over again for the next generation is very difficult to do. And bands that actually, you know, bust that generation gap are so few and far between. Stick with your bread and butter, focus on who your true fans are, and branch out from there.
That's a great perspective, and I'm thinking about how that would apply to Metallica, for example. At what point did they stop caring about what the age group was of their listeners, and they just started making records? It quite literally became a business, but they acted like it wasn't. There was a good 20 plus years they were still, at least in their eyes, every 25-year-old male, they were still the favorite band. But Norma Jean says, we know that you like different music than what you used to like, and we're the same way. So here's this new record that we've made, and if you like it, you can listen to this now. We're still going to play Memphis Shall Be Laid to Waste at the next show.
Last song every show.
Yeah.
Usually featuring Josh Gogan.
Seriously, last song every show.
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with having a show closer.
I think that's respectful, though, because I think that, I mean, that really proves it, and we've mentioned this a few times, but it proves it's for them, because that's not a way that you make money and you build your audience, is by, you know, doing something solely for you and aging with you. You know, you make your money by, as a musician, by bringing a younger crowd in, and they're not doing that. I don't think they're trying to do that, at least. So they're, you know, I don't see them out there touring with whatever Black Veil Brides or whatever you know, Hot Topic band is buzzing right now.
Is Hot Topic still a store?
I believe so, but I don't go to the mall, so
but
I couldn't tell you for sure.
We got to move on, guys. We're eating up Brandon's whole evening.
2013.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Wrongdoers.
Oh man, Wrongdoers.
Can you open without saying "oh man"?
No, I can't.
Not on this.
I
not
can't.
on this episode.
I
We'll
actually
edit
can't.
those out.
The "oh man" has to be in there. Oh man, the aftermath. But this album kicked my ass, dude.
This is 100% where I'm back on board. So I heard this for the first time and I said yes.
Well, like, to jump onto what Joe was saying about like how Norma Jean has this way of doing an introductory track that like it's like a hook with a worm. So like, since Anti-Mother, I'm into the more melodic, atmospheric Norma Jean. So they do that shit on this first track. Like, it's totally subverted in that, like, they don't just release a Bless the Martyr type song first. Like, the first song, Hive Mind, is like a long fucking song that's atmospheric, but it's like now what I've come to expect from a Norma Jean album. And I loved it. I loved the build-up on that song. And then they fucking come in with If You've Got It at 5, You've Got It at 50, and just fucking burn the house down. Like, right in front of you. They're like, oh, by the way, we're still that band that kicked your ass back in 2002. So we're going to do that for you right now.
Yeah, that song and Funeral Singer, I think it's called, were both the ones that stood out for me big time.
Oh, my God, dude. Like, it was like, oh, my God, I'm getting the new Norma Jean that I love, but I'm also getting that crazy fucking Norma Jean that I loved, you know,
when you were a teenager.
When I was a teenager, and to have all that on one record was just like not contrived. Like I don't feel like they were doing it to just keep the old people on board, because like they should have done that back in Anti-Mother if that's what they were gonna do. But like, if you got it at 5, you got it at 50. Is an amazing song. It's like the noise and nothing more. Who's to blame? Who's to blame? You know, like it's just you and I. Like it's just fucking great. And the video to this song where they're like having a fucking kegger at this house, and then like they're drinking milk though. They're not drinking beer. And then at the end, it like halfway through the video, they all start puking, like puking milk all over the place, like into the pool, into the. I mean, it's so cheesy. Like you can tell they're using like fucking fake vomit, you know, inducers and all this shit. Like it's so fucking.
Brandon, you need to take inspiration from this. We need to actually do this. American Standards' next music video is the Dairy Challenge.
Dude, seriously, like I will
chugging the gallon.
I will drive out to your place, dude, and as long as you do the video and I get to be the first one that pukes on screen, like we're doing that.
I would want nothing more.
This is amazing, and this song just killed it. But actually, my favorite song on this record isn't this one. It's actually the title track, Wrongdoers. Because Wrongdoers starts off heavy, like you'd expect from Norma Jean. But the chorus is so fucking infectious. Like, I can't get over it. It's just like, we came for killing. Hopeless, yes, we know, but we don't mind. Like, it fucking works. And it's just everything that I love about this band accumulated over time into one song. And like when he ends it off with that loud scream, it's just like, you know, and you know I never listened, and you know that I'll never learn. Like I was just like, fuck, this is me right now in 2013. Like it's exactly how I feel about all the past mistakes I've made in my life, you know, and how in a way I've grown a lot, but I'm also still the same asshole I was the whole time.
Yeah, I was out in outer space in 2013. I think I was nothing but like Cybreed.
Oh no, dude! Outer Space is in 2016.
Yeah,
that's the next album.
Yeah, I know. I'm just having a little fun.
I'm about to have a religious experience.
Brandon mentioned Funeral Singer. That's one of my favorites. That in Sword in Mouth, Fire Eyes. That was the other one that I dug on this.
Did you see the video for that song?
No, I don't watch music videos anymore.
Okay, I'm gonna try to explain this as good as I can, but I know Joe's just gonna link it in the show notes. But Sword in Mouth, Fire Eyes starts off with this dude surfing at the beach, and there's a shark after him. It's very obvious the shark's after him, and so he gets out of the water and goes to work, and the shark fucking follows him to work. Okay, and then the whole time like Norma Jean's like in the office singing, you know, and like it's not even the heaviest Norma Jean song, but like holy shit, like this video makes the song. So they get work, and then like the shark like gets a job there. Like you see the shark in the office with his boss, like shaking his hand or whatever.
Oh my gosh!
And so like there's this part where like the copy machine breaks, and like he's looking at it and he can't figure out what's wrong with it or whatever. And he's trying to fix the copy machine, and then the fucking shark just like walks over and like Fonzie hits the machine and it starts working again. And everyone's like, oh my god! So like. The shark, like, and then, like, his boss comes in choking on something, and, like, everybody's like, oh, my God, what do we do? He's choking or whatever. And, like, the shark walks over and gives him the fucking Heimlich maneuver, and then, like, fucking... so, like, the shark becomes best friends with his boss, and, like, shark becomes, like, employee of the month. And, like, this dude's just, like, watching all this happen. Like, everybody at the office loves the shark. And, like, they're all best friends with the shark. And then so like he fucking goes home at the end of the day, and he opens up his front door, and the fucking shark's just sitting there in his living room. And he fucking like, all right, well fuck it. And he just walks over to the shark and puts his head down, and the shark fucking bites him in half. Like it's fucking crazy. But like,
now is it like some dude in like a shark costume, like you would see like with?
Dude, it's pure cheese. Yeah. It's
okay, so it looks like some like those idiot T-Rex.
Yeah, it looks just like those T-Rex costumes. It's nice. Just totally fucking cheese, and it's great.
I'm gonna have to check that out, even though I'm not a big music video watcher anymore.
Oh, no, this one's totally worth the 3 or 4 minutes.
All right, I'll check it out.
And we'll link it in the show notes.
Sounds good.
It's so great, and like it's so powerful. Like that song is really powerful, and like makes the video so much more than it is on its own. I mean, Corey is like straight up a melodic singer now.
Yeah, and I like it,
and it works. But it only works for Norma Jean or 100 Suns later on. This album is like the perfect mix of their melodic side and their heavy side. And like in 2013, I mean, I couldn't have imagined anything better.
And it's an extremely underrated record. I don't hear a lot of people talk about Wrongdoers.
Well, it's like having your cake and eating it too, because it's the old and the new.
It's a masterpiece.
Oh, we're about to get to a masterpiece.
I've got nothing other than, for some reason, something led me to listen to this album like the day it came out, and it made me go back. Like I was full on board for Blessed and Martyr. Oh God, the Aftermath. Around Redeemer, I started to fall off. And then when Wrongdoers came out, I listened to it on day one. And that's what made me go back and listen to Anti-Mother and Meridial. So I think Wrongdoers definitely hit like everything I wanted from Norma Jean and made me wonder like why I stopped listening to them. Which was cool because at this point, in 2013, I had grown up, matured a little bit, so I was able to appreciate the Anti-Mother a little bit more than when I listened to it maybe the first or one or two times when it first came out.
Is it time?
It's time. Joe, do you want to lead us off?
You might be here a while if I do.
Go ahead, dude. Let's just hear it.
2016. Polar Similar. As of this recording, I believe I have had the worst years of my life. And while that was going on, I was calling people 24/7 just trying to talk because that's what they tell me I should do instead of thinking about it. Talk about it. And one day when nobody wanted to answer the phone, Dan texts me and says, "Fuck that, you should be listening to Polar Similar by Norma Jean." And it made it a little better. And it still makes it a little better. This record is a masterpiece. It is entirely different from everything I've heard before, but it still sounds like Norma Jean. I get a satisfaction listening to it knowing that I think it was recorded in a home-built studio. That inspires me as an engineer. It's labeled as a rock record. No longer do we have metal and alternative metal. I know every member of the band is new, so I believe this is honestly Corey's vision of Norma Jean. I think I feel the same way about this record that Dan feels about Arbiter by Hopesfall.
I don't know, man. Those are some pretty intense feelings.
The whole point about this, the fact that there's no, at this point, there's no other original members. I mean, Corey's not even an original member, so he has the tenure in this band at this point. Has there been any other band that's really successfully done that, that's been able to say everybody from the first album is completely out, and this is still the band that started, 15 years ago?
Zao.
Or more than 15 years ago.
Yeah, Zayo's the only one that comes to mind. This is fucking landmark.
This is somewhere else. Everything up to this point, every time it changed, every time it went somewhere else, or it took you to the next step, or we're no longer teenagers and now we're adults, this is somewhere else.
This is their Blast into Space album. Like, they really doubled down on the atmosphere. Like, the atmosphere was there on previous albums, but it was just there to be there. Like, it was just the way you were supposed to feel while you were listening to it. This record creates a feeling of disconnection with planet Earth. And I can't get over how it takes all of the melody, it takes all of the passion, the 10,000 pounds of bacon grease that's still there, and it creates an album that
gets 1 million watts.
That's 1 million fucking watts. Like, that was
one of their most streamed songs on Spotify from what I saw.
Yeah, dude. Like, it is crazy that this band is still as relevant as they are this late in their career. And, like, I can't get enough of it, dude. I still listen to Polar Similar, and I hear things that I didn't hear before. Like, this doesn't sound that different than Wrongdoers as far as, like, the overall sound goes. But, like, it does. It feels like its own branch of Norma Jean, like something that I hope we hear on the next record, but I don't know if we will or not. Like, some of the lyrical themes on this album, like 1 Million Watts is kind of a unique perspective of a man that's in an abusive relationship. Like, some of the shit that he says on that song is like, I feel bad that you're angry, and I'm sorry. I don't care for what it's worth. If it ever comes down to me or you, you're probably going to die. I'm not fucking around.
And that I'm not fucking around definitely got some flack, right, on the internet?
A little bit, but not as much as you'd think. Like, I mean, Under Oath went, like, full-on secular or whatever. Like, they were like, we're no longer a Christian band, so we say fuck on our album. But, like, Norma Jean, it wasn't like that. Like, if you listen to that song and you listen to the perspective that it gives on the situation that it's talking about, the I'm not fucking around doesn't...
It's appropriate for the lyric.
Yeah,
like, they're not saying fuck just to say fuck.
No, not at all. And it's really weird, too, because the band did go back to Solid State for this release. Like, Wrongdoers and Merit did blah, 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 blah. That album...
Meridional.
Those two albums were on Razor and Tie, but they're back on Solid State, so to have a fuck on a Solid State release is kind of different. But, like, I didn't care. Like, I mean, I might have cared back in 2002 when I had to, like, explain it to my parents. But, like, now, like, I'm an adult and I get it, and I don't have a problem with it, and I don't think it's a reflection on his, like, spiritual well-being or whatever.
You better hope your parents aren't listening to this, Dan. They're going to be very upset with you.
They're going to be so mad.
No, I 100% agree. I mean, I don't think it's a big deal, but I just remember seeing the headlines of, like, places like Lamb Goat and Revolver, like, posting, you know, is Norma Jean still Christian? They said fuck in a song.
Right, even though Corey said
and in
fuck
the comment
in how
section,
many interviews.
like, going nuts on it, you know?
Right, I think one of the things, at least how it is with my kids, with my teenagers, is they're on YouTube 24/7. You know, the F-bomb is just part of the vernacular that everybody uses now. It doesn't have that taboo feel that it had 15 years ago. And I think that's part of the reason why he can say it, and it's not that big of a deal whenever you look at it in context. It would be, it's, you know, when it's outside of context that you would say that there might be a problem, and I think that's probably the people that took umbrage with the fact that he did say fuck.
Yeah, and it feels like more of like an old school line of thinking. I think like maybe the whole idea of him just being real with it is almost like the same thing as if you follow like Matt Carter and guys from Emory with their podcast Bad Christian and stuff. It's like when you make yourself just a real person and you allow your, you know, whatever, you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you allow your flaws, and you allow yourself just to get the level of everybody else, I think you have a greater chance of letting people listen to you and what you have to say. And I think doing, like, you know, what they're doing with this, just saying it as it is, saying it as like anybody else would talk about something, I think probably brings more people into the message than it alienates. It may just alienate the people that are of like the older mindset.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it just alienates the people that probably weren't going to listen to the music anyway, because they're just like, ooh, you know, that's metal. You know, it's the same people like my grandmother that bought me my Carmen CDs when I was a teenager. I mean, those are the type of people that are probably, like I said, taking umbrage with the word that he said instead of listening to the message that's being presented.
Yeah, and it's not really a popular message either.
No, it's not, but it's an important message.
And I've challenged it from day one. I don't think he actually says fuck, and if he does, somebody edited out the consonant.
Yeah, it's not committal at all.
Committal being the key consonant. I mean,
yeah.
You can tell me that's what he said, and I'd believe you if you told me, and I'd believe him if he told me. But when I listened to it, nobody heard it. I want to know where it came from that, oh, it's this big controversy. Norma Jean said fuck. I'm like, how many times have I listened to this record? And I've never heard it, and I'm listening.
But yeah, like beyond that, though, there's all this weird shit on the album, too. Like all these weird spacey interludes.
The people.
Yeah, or it's like a fucking weird
the
British telephone.
To repeat what Dan has
thing.
said over and over so far, if we get to talk to Corey, I have to know where that came from.
Yeah, I need to know.
What's that weird-ass calliope thing going on too on one of those tracks.
Yeah,
too.
I don't know.
I mean, is it a calliope? Is there just somebody just like mimicking it on a synth or something?
I have no idea, but this album has some of the best Norma Jean songs on it that you're ever going to hear, and the atmosphere that it creates. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I would recommend, after listening to this podcast, listen to the whole thing all the way through. Like, take the time, because it's really worth it, and it's a confirmation of everything we've been saying. I love this band. There's not a lot of bad things I can say about it, and I just really hope that we're communicating that well enough to the people that are hearing this.
Is that your final thought, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, for my final thought, I would definitely have to quote Clank Dialosa and say, I want more! You know, I want more albums like this, or whatever they've got for me. It's probably going to be fine no matter what it sounds like.
Jeff, what about you?
I'm going to have to say I was very pleasantly surprised with the progression and how they were able to do a really good job of keeping... You can always, whenever you hear the songs, you always know that it's Norma Jean, but they've done enough to recreate themselves as time has gone on to keep it interesting as well. And that's kind of the fine line that bands always try to walk, and I think they have done so quite successfully. Most bands either sell out or they keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they can't figure it out. And I think these guys, got it done in spades. I think that's musical masterpieces that people ought to be checking out. This is really, really good stuff.
The Brandon Kellum of American Standards.
He's so official. Yeah, no, I think Norma Jean spawned a whole generation of hardcore and metal bands that were using those dissonant chords that were, in maybe the realm of Christian or secular. But I think it definitely, and I mean, I can't name a whole lot off the top of my head, but I definitely remember during that time, so many local bands that all had just like people's names as their band name, that were doing like the hardcore metalcore stuff. So I think they influenced so many bands. I'm really excited to see what they do next. I know they keep posting on their socials that they're working on stuff. I know Corey probably is more active than any of the other guys in the band. And it makes me wonder, now that he's put out the 100 Sons album, if that's going to be his avenue to do what he's doing in the melodic realm. And that means either Norma Jean goes back to something very heavy like they started, or maybe something we just haven't heard yet. So I think it's a very exciting time for them. It seems like with 1,000 watts, that's something that's got enough buzz that's going to get excitement and probably bring a new crowd in. So I'm super excited to hear it. I mean, Norma Jean, like I said, going back to what we started with, is something that got me from nu metal into this style of music. So
everything I want to say about Norma Jean, I forget when I start listening to Polar Similar. That's how much that album impacts me. Norma Jean is a band that bridges all the gaps in heavy music. Christian band, secular band, hardcore, metalcore, dissonant. I'm sure if you were a grind fan, you could find something in those early records that would lead you across the bridge.
I'm right here, dude.
And they are one of the most important bands everybody listens to. There has to be a reason for that. Brandon, what's your album of the week?
So what I've been listening to most lately is there's a new band called The Threats. And it actually has, I believe, some guys from The Chariot in it. And it sounds very much like, probably like The Chariot, but maybe a little more punk rock, a little more rock and roll. If you're going to start off with any song, I would say Rope is one of their really great songs. I think one of the first singles they put out. So yeah, The Threats it's definitely, they put out this EP this year, constant rotation. I'm so excited to see what they put out with their full length coming out.
Jeff, what about you?
Oh, I've been listening to Jets to Brazil. The album is Orange Rhyming Dictionary. So if you're not real familiar with the band, there's an old punk band, Jawbreaker. Blake, the lead singer, he's actually, this is another one of his bands, and this is kind of like an indie rock, emo kind of thing, so right in my wheelhouse.
I'm not going to lie to you guys, I've been listening to Arbiter by Hopesfall a lot.
Album of the year? Is that what that is, Dan?
It really is, and I've I'm wearing the Hopesfall Arbiter t-shirt right now.
Super fan.
I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm sorry, the Flavor-Aid. It was not Kool-Aid that the people in Jonestown drank.
Can't afford the Kool-Aid.
It was Flavor-Aid.
Is it any mystery that my album of the week is Polar Similar by Norma Jean?
Shocker.
If you're going to talk about Norma Jean, that's my album of the week. You're lucky it's not my album of the week every week. Who wants to sum up 100 episodes of this podcast in 3 sentences or less?
Drunk.
Give me your money.
5-star reviews.
Brandon Kellum.
It has been said on more than one occasion that this podcast never would have talked to any guest or any famous person if Brandon Kellum had not sent us a tweet in the middle of the movie theater getting ready to watch the new Power Rangers movie. So I think we all need to say thank you to Brandon.
Brandon, thank you.
I'm so glad you remember that. That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, getting ready to watch Power Rangers when somehow I stumbled across the podcast and I saved it and said I need to listen to this and reach out to these guys.
You're like, hey, assholes, I would like to come on and discuss metal with you guys.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't that word for word, but sure, why not?
That's how I choose to remember it.
That memory will get more blurry with more episodes when you get to episode 200 and you've had a few more beers.
And on that note, this has been episode 100 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money.
I need